Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Crick from the Elevate Partnership, and I'm one of the co-hosts for the Pocket Dojo podcast.
And I'm Asha Singh from Learning Through Doing. I'm the other co-host.
Welcome to the Pocket Dojo, where we'll be talking with organisational leaders about how to turn the what of leadership into the how we actually need to do it in practice to be more effective today. In this episode, we're talking about the challenges that women commonly face as leaders and how we've helped our clients to deal with them and overcome them. In today's episode, we're talking about the challenges that women commonly face as leaders and how we've helped our clients to deal with them.
I recently came across this really interesting, relevant research. How Did She Get There? Published in October 2022 by the Bridge Partnership, an international organisational leadership development consultancy. And we are Left Field, a design thinking studio. The purpose of the research was to try to understand better how women can get to the top of organisations with some really common barriers that they face. The lived reality of women and men at work is really different. It can be from such simple things as noticing the temperature of a room, which has been set to a male norm, to being spoken over, which is something I personally can really identify with. When asked by the researchers, 36% of women expressed how it was much more difficult for them to be listened to and taken seriously compared to 15% of their male colleagues. To perhaps the most important of all is rising up the ladder in an organization, if that's what women want to do. Despite consistently higher performance, their possibilities are often much more limited.
There's a real noticeable gap that isn't getting any smaller. Globally, women continue to take on 75% of the unpaid workload, acting as the caregiver for children and elderly relatives. During the pandemic of the past 3 years, women were increasingly more burned out than men. 1 in 4 women have considered downshifting their career. It's clear that inherent biases exist in organisations and society at large, and divisions are deeply entrenched.
Even though organizations are aware of the gap, they don't seem to be any nearer to closing it. Many of the solutions that have been tried to date, and there's lots of research around on these, have been focused for the most part on fixing women, asking them to be more demanding, more assertive, to lean in short, to be more like men, rather than trying to address an unhealthy organization. So, Paul, I'd love to understand how this research corresponds to what you found in your investigations in early 2022.
So, in thinking about this challenge and this whole set of challenges, one of the mistakes that's often made is to go out and to design something that tries to make things better, and we present it and we go, ta-da, isn't that better? And everyone goes, no, it's not what we wanted. So we took the important first step, which was really to go out and to speak with a group of women leaders. And in the end, we ended up speaking to 40 women in various sectors. So we talked public sector, we talked the non-profit sector, and we also talked to private sector. We also had some views from the military as well. So we got a broad spectrum of views and experiences that told us verbatim what some of the journeys were into leadership and what some of those challenges were. And what we did was we distilled those into what you see here, which are the post-it notes. So I have to fight, I have to sacrifice was a common theme. I'm tired of having to deal with stuff that men don't want to. There was often a story that said, if it's something emotional, can someone else deal with that? Because it's something that traditionally, and I know these are sweeping generalizations, but it came out of the dialogue that said, dealing with more softer stuff, emotional stuff is something that men generally seem to find more difficult. I'm fed up with not being seen and heard and supported and used as a secret weapon. I thought that was an interesting comment. not being able to take the rightful place at the table in terms of being able to speak the truth. So on the one hand, there's this encouragement to lean in and to be more assertive, but when actually women are, then they're seen as being too much, or too big for their boots, or whatever that appropriate expression is. A common theme was there was this constant sense of being exhausted, but always picking themselves up. So this overwhelm that women were experiencing, not just in the workplace but also outside the workplace, caused tremendous difficulty. Then we had adverse experiences, whether they were outside of work but very often inside of work, that were catching up with them. Women would be cautious walking into certain situations, and would hold back, and this put a drag, they felt, on their performance. There was also a sense of, when women had worked hard and become successful, there was almost a stepping back and saying, okay, I've done this is great, but what now? I've been successful, and you know what? There's something missing, and I don't know quite what that is yet. There was also a lot of talk about wanting their career on their own terms rather than someone else's terms. The last interesting area was where work situations seemed to cause all kinds of difficulties in terms of, triggering a responsive behavior, a reactive behavior that in some ways was an overused strength, and people really felt that actually it wasn't the way that they wanted to respond or to be in the workplace.
Well, Paul, that sounds like a pretty close confirmation of what the Bridge Partnership and Left Field found in their investigation as well. During our recent visit to Broughton Sanctuary, Paul and I started a conversation about how we came to support women leaders in organisations to be able to lead on their own terms. This is part of what we'll be looking at in the renewal retreat at Broughton next spring.
So there's an important book by Giles Hutchins and Laura Storm called Regenerative Leadership. And in that, they talk about the 4 disconnections that we seem to be seeing all over the world right now. The first is the disconnections between humans and nature. The second is the apparent disconnection between masculine energy and feminine energy. The third one is the disconnection between mind, body, and spirit. And the final one was between logic and emotion. And the reason we're putting this retreat together is because we are hoping to do some work with some senior women to help them through the process of doing their own reconnections to those things. Is that about right?
I think so. And I think, also just at a personal level, when we met at a leadership event in Germany just over a year ago, actually, it feels like so much longer.
Yes.
It was last summer. Though I think there was a recognition that both you and I are holding combinations of those things, and that we were really curious to bring those together and see how that could help to create an amazing experience for women who want to explore these disconnections. Exactly.
And I get a sense from the research that we've both done that these are themes that keep coming up over and over again, not necessarily in that precise language, but that we've reached an inflection point. We recognize that things need to be different. How do we do that? So
exactly.
The why of the retreats is to give women that opportunity for exploration.
Yeah, and also just another thing that's coming to me as we're talking is that there's a lot of energy and action and let's cancel everything that we think is not working, or we make these strong judgments about whether something is good or not, or whatever, and rather than sort of pour fuel or on the flames of that, wiping everything out and starting all over again, it's really about exploration and healing, and there's so many different aspects that could be explored, so that it's a process of integration, as opposed to let's just scratch everything and start all over again in ways that we should do or shouldn't do. And I think we both really want to get away from that kind of approach to dealing with some of the challenges.
I agree. I think it's too easy to throw away the baby out with the bathwater, as the expression goes. And I think you have to find where you are now to be able to say, right, this is where we are. This is a recognition of how I truly feel, when I take time to explore that, and then to go through a thought process of, as a collective and individually, to think about, okay, so where do I want to go now, and what options do I have when I take the time to slow down a bit.
So what brought you to Broughton? This is the first time I've come here, thanks to you, inviting us to come here.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm loving it. It's an amazing place that I'd love to talk a little bit more about in a minute as well. But just curious, what brought you here in the first place? Why the connection with Broughton?
It was a connection my wife had made with Liz Dawes. Liz Dawes, the forest guide. She does all the Liz is going to work with us on day one. And it was, do you fancy doing this? It was kind of like, this kind of looks cool. And we were looking for a weekend break, and we liked the countryside. So we took a look, and we stayed over in Keighley at an Airbnb, and then we came across, and we were just bowled over by the sights, the sounds, the senses, all the senses were engaged in a way that it's difficult to explain unless you get here. Because I know you and I have had the conversation. I'm going, you've got to come, and it's hard. But I think you'd agree, once you get here, it's the sort of place that impacts you in ways that you don't expect. And it has a very calming influence. There's a lot of nature to take in. The food's exquisite. I mean, really.
Yeah, it's been really tasty.
And the facilities are just perfect. The spaces are beautifully designed. That we're not trying to do something in a Holiday Inn or a Crown Plaza around Heathrow somewhere. We're actually taking time, and the Tempest family, who curate and look after and manage and develop this site, have poured so much into the design and making it work specifically for all kinds of different retreats. So it just fits. So that's how I got here.
Yeah, and it's been amazing for me. We haven't been here even 24 hours. I'm on the back of a bout of flu, and I had serious doubts about whether I was even going to make it on the plane. And I thought, great to see you guys, and I brought in the Tempest family and everybody here have made a real effort to welcome us, and I didn't want to let them down. And I have to say, even on the train up from London from Leeds, I was like, shall I just get off at Skipton and go back? And then I was like, of course I'm not going to do that. And I'm so glad that I'm here. And I mean, apart from the beauty and the care and the love that is so apparent in everything that we've experienced just in these less than a day, really, I'm really struck by all these different spaces. So it's October in Yorkshire, the weather is what it is, and it's pants, quite frankly. And yeah, I've really enjoyed actually even being out. Well, you and I went down to the river yesterday.
We did.
A very, full kind of about to burst its banks type river. In the driving rain, and blustering is a gentle adjective to describe the wind. And we went up to, looking out here is the edges of the moor, and Cameron, the general manager here, took Tina, your wife, and myself out in a serious bit of Land Rover, whatever, pickup truck through a forge that was nearly as swelling as the river, and up to one of the houses up there, which was howling a gale, and it just was so evocative and powerful. And the different spaces that we've walked around here, I'm astonished. I've done my own, work in retreat. I've lived in a Buddhist community in the heart of Scotland. I've been to different things around the world, and I'm really struck by what has been created here. So these really different spaces, some are very elegant, some are more kind of functional, but there's a really strong, energetic, I feel amazing for somebody who's just getting over the flu. I love the vegan food. I love the different energy of these spaces, like you say. It can cater for so many different things in ways that really, a retreat in particular is so much about the place.
It is, and it aligns with the work they're doing here in terms of regeneration, renewal, rediscovery, reconnection. All those themes are what we're bringing to the retreat for senior women, successful, strong women who've got to an inflection point in their thinking or maybe their career, to provide a relevant experience, a beautiful experience and a powerful experience that when they go away from it, they're going to be changed in some small way to move on to whatever is right for them. So I think this is a superb place to do it.
Yeah, it really feels like a renewal runs through apps. I feel renewed, actually. I'm a long time coach, facilitator. I work mainly today with executive teams. I have done a lot of work with senior women leaders looking to find their own voice and their own way of leading in quite hierarchical, very geopolitical, often conflict-ridden, mature organisational systems, which they are expected to transform. And exploring with them, how can they do that in ways that allow them to be themselves, to be who they are. They're often, really smart, powerful, competitive, high-achieving, amazing women that do amazing things in their spare time that, I'm like astounded by. That's not who I am, but I have found that what I can bring as a woman moving through those systems, as somebody who comes in and out and knows them well, the systems, knows the dynamics, knows the challenges, knows the stories, the narratives that get told, can be really effective in helping them to find their own way through. So that's what is bringing me into doing the work. And in coming together with Paul, we met at a leadership circle event. That's one of the systems of leadership that we've both been interested in along the way. At an event not much more than a year ago. And I'll let Paul, talk about your own work in that. But in, starting to experiment with Paul about some of the work that he will also bring, I think, into the retreat, there was a really lovely connection of bringing that. You mentioned about the disconnect between masculine and feminine and being in nature. And I think those were, for me, at least, the particular sort of things that got me really curious about how could we bring these, who we are, together into something to create the kind of experience we want to offer to the women that will take part.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my work's been, so I've been a coach for 13 years. And as part of becoming a coach, you end up doing your own work.
Fundamental part.
It's, absolutely fundamental. And what's been interesting is when you then go out into the world and say, hey, I'm a coach, who can I serve? My clients have been senior women, not because I've necessarily gone out and said, hey, senior women, come and work with me, but simply somehow that's the way it's ended up. And they're in large corporate. So I was a management consultant working all over the world for 20 plus years and saw all kinds of things. I worked with 40 plus global companies in different states of change and progress, and looking at the systems in there, what worked, what didn't. I got involved in training what might be called soft skills. And the more you delve into that, the more you get a sense of dissatisfaction. So I was lucky to do a TED talk in 2019. And there's this astonishing figure in there that still boggles my mind and most people's minds, because it's just so big, which is they estimated we spent $366 billion globally on training leaders around the world in various terms. There was a part of me that said, well, if that's the case, why is it not working? I couldn't do that. So I couldn't figure out what that was. And so I wanted to find new ways of moving away from let's all fly to a hotel in Copenhagen, let's do flip charts, let's do role plays, let's do models, which are all very valid, but if they're not working, we need to do something, not necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we need to try other things. And my experience is you have to teach the whole person, so therefore you have to bring the body into play. That doesn't happen in hotel conference rooms too often, if at all. And I think that's essential. I think also we need to bring people outside. So, this flying into an airport, going to the hotel, spending 3 days in a conference room, getting in a taxi, going back to the hotel, you miss out on a whole bunch of things that could open up people to new ideas, new ways of being, new ways of connecting, that those curriculums don't do. And so when I came to Göttingen and we met, I was bringing, so if you read my material on LinkedIn, you'll find out that I do martial arts. I'm a black belt in Aikido. And I wanted to find a way, well, it's not so much that, it's how do you take those principles and that we learn on the mat and learn them off the mat, because they are so relevant. And so when I was in Göttingen, I devised a class, and it fortunately went really well. That's where we met.
That's cool.
And what I loved about working with you was there is a creative tension here between us that is this masculine, feminine energy in kind of the way it's supposed to work. So we're not always sweetness and light. We sometimes have the odd difficult conversation, but we get through it. But we respect how each of us comes to the table and what we bring, and we're still learning what that is. And we want people to share in that. We want our participants to do that, because what we learned from the research we did was it isn't about fixing women. They don't need fixing. They're fine. They're successful. They're strong. What they need to do is reconnect and rediscover and find their voice again, not because they never had one, they did, but to go back into that and go, oh, I've got time, I've got space, I've got other people to commune with. And we've got masculine energy and feminine energy in the room facilitating this and in the outdoors. Hopefully that will become a catalyst,
I'm sure
that will spark conversations around an agenda that takes people through a whole cognitive experience and also an embodied experience, where there's a great deal of freedom to explore that without judgment, and in a way that is safe for each of the participants.
Yeah, and also realistic, So coming back to what you were mentioning earlier, Paul, about the amount of money that's spent on leadership development, right? And leadership is so contextual today, with the challenges that we face, even within a very structured environment, etc. For people to be able to find small but powerful ways to connect with each other, to use the tech that is available in ways that's effective, to find, to use some sort of technical language for a moment, affordance and agency, are fundamental in being able to be effective.
Okay.
And I think, that's what we really want people to be able to explore here.
Yeah.
And in such a way that they can go back into daily life and for it to be really useful.
Yeah. In the echo chamber that is LinkedIn, we keep seeing the same messages over and over again, and they're actually not they're useful reminders in some ways, but they're reminders of what the old is. And the whole world, as we come out of the pandemic and into this environment that is perhaps more chaotic than it's ever been, more uncertain than it's ever been, then we need something new to emerge. But that comes from individuals. It doesn't come from people saying, do it like us. It doesn't come from people saying, here's a change initiative that's going to change your organization. Because the change, as we were saying earlier when we were walking back from the woods, we were saying, change is an individual decision, and it's a dance, it's not a light switch. So our hope is that in designing this, and in the way that we bring and hold this space, for people to use that sort of phrase, gives people an opportunity and some time to really explore what needs to be explored for them. I still can't really get my head around that number. It's so huge, particularly when you look at all the major challenges we have around the world now, and how our leadership really doesn't seem to be doing what it needs to.
I know, it's insane, isn't it? So, Paul, that's a really nice introduction to some of the work that you've been doing to help women leaders become more effective and be true to themselves. What did you actually do in practice to help them, and what changed for them as a result?
Well, as you'll know yourself from your own work, no two clients are the same. The presenting problem or the issue that comes into the coaching room is never really the coaching issue. There's always something underneath that. And I worked with someone who was about to step into a general manager role, the general manager at country level, for a global technology organization. And this person was just full of self-doubt and couldn't understand why her peers and her bosses were saying, here's all these great opportunities and we want you to do this and we think you'd be good at this. Which one would you like to choose? And she actually came in saying, I've got this major presentation to do and I'm really robotic, or I really get a sense of I'm robotic, and I don't feel comfortable in my own skin. I mean, it's a common thing. We've had fun recording this, so it's a common thing to sort of freeze or be a little bit static. And the work I did with her really looked at things that had happened in the past, certain what I would call sensitizing events or important events that had an impact on her neurobiology. And we went back to look at, well, what was it that you needed to learn when you experienced that? And there's a whole range of techniques that can be used, but I picked one where I took her through essentially a thought experiment. Where we went into a theatre and we invited the person that caused the issue to come on stage. They had a conversation about what went on. And what came through that was the lesson that needed to be learned, which was actually she was very capable. It wasn't about her, it was about the other person. And therefore that kind of balanced things up. So when we came out of the thought experiment and said, so how do you feel now? It was a case of, well, I feel a lot lighter. Then what we did was we actually went to a theatre, one of the West End theatres in London, and we were lucky enough to get access to be able to put her right on stage in front of an audience. And the idea there was simply to give her a way of having a visual and an auditory and a felt sense anchor that was really positive. So we just got people to clap while she was on stage. She didn't have to say anything. And then we just helped her stand taller in her shoes. It wasn't that she was slouching. It was really that she needed to feel she was standing taller. She was a tall young woman. And so that's the kind of work we do, or certainly I do, when I'm helping people to stand in their own voice. So it's not about fixing them. It's really tapping into some of the stories and narratives that these women are telling themselves that simply aren't true. We just need to find a way of helping them to convince themselves they're not true. And what that does is that produces a whole set of different creative options and opportunities that they can pursue. So that's one example. How about you, Asha?
What a fantastic story, Paul. So last year I was working with a senior leader in a global organization who work in this area of aerospace. Aerospace is obviously a really geopolitical sector, so it's highly regulated. It's quite hierarchical and it's pretty old school in many ways. It's also obviously really male dominated, although this particular client organization have done a lot of work to improve diversity and bring women in. not least because STEM, women in STEM rather, is obviously a really big issue for lots of organisations. So this leader, I'll call her Sarah. That's obviously not her name, but I'll call her Sarah for now. She was fairly new into role. She was also in a new technical area. She'd come from a very different one. So she felt quite challenged by the fact that she was being asked to lead a group of highly experienced experts, all of whom, except for one, if I remember rightly, were men. They were quite good at, because they hadn't been led for a while. She came in after a gap of leadership. And they were quite good at avoiding all the things that they didn't want to deal with and getting on with, the technical areas that were interesting for them. So given her competitive, ambitious, intelligent nature, Sarah felt really under pressure because she was being asked to not only, get great results out of this group of men who hadn't been led for quite a long time, but also to do it in an area where they clearly had a lot more knowledge operationally, technically than she did. And it was a real challenge for her. So I do a lot more collective work these days. I don't do that much work with individuals. I think both things are really important. We need to do our own, development, and then look at how we interact with others, particularly when we work in large organisations, because it's all in the system, if you like. So I brought them into a 2-day workshop, actually in 2 different locations, just to kind of add that into the mix. And we did quite a lot of preparation first to get some, useful information, etc., a bit like you did with your research for the retreat. And we focused really on 2 areas. So the inner nature, let's say, so how our own beliefs, values, behaviors, etc., create some of the dynamics that we obviously experience, both immediately in our own teams or in a wider organisation, and then at the challenges themselves that operationally, whatever that this team needed to look at. It was a really powerful, playful also couple of days in which the importance of a facilitated dialogue really helped them to look at things that they don't normally, obviously consider on a daily basis because they're too caught up in the busyness of operational life when you're under pressure, etc. And I think Sarah in particular found a couple of things really surprising. So first of all, the fact that I modeled or showed them, demonstrated how to have dialogue rather than to come up with a plan of action to begin with, that really helped her to experience how it was possible to enable her team rather than drive them to results. It meant for the team that they could have, really open, honest discussion and conversation about things that, firstly, they don't really talk about all the time, and that help them to regroup and also to bring forth, all the wisdom and knowledge and experience that they had for addressing the operational challenges, which at the end of the day, that was what they need to do. Mm-hmm. So they both had this opportunity to think about the deeper stuff, and then having done that, to address, what it is that they needed to do together. And the other thing that I think really struck Sarah was the fact that people are just really busy every day. It wasn't that they didn't want to talk to her or listen to her or that they were speaking over her. They were quite surprised by, she and the other female colleagues shared quite a lot of their different experiences in the team. And the guys were surprised, shocked is perhaps a bit strong, but were surprised by what they heard and were very respectful and, made every effort to make sure that those things would get addressed in the future. So that kind of team, collective, exploration also at a deeper level can be really, really useful. And join us for episode 2 of the Pocket Dojo podcast on Monday, the 27th of November at 9 a.m, when we'll be talking about the importance of finding your own voice as a women leader and ways that you can do that. As always, you'll be able to watch us on your favourite podcast channels, including YouTube. We'll also be on social media at LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. See you then.
Bye for now.